Okay, so when you think elf, what comes to mind? Probably a graceful, immortal archer, right? And a dwarf? Probably some stout, bearded axe wielder living in a mountain. Well, what if I told you that all those modern fantasy ideas, they're just a shadow of a much older, way stranger, and honestly, more fascinating story? Let's trace these myths all the way back to their source.
So for this whole journey, we're going straight to the source. Our guide is a total classic of folklore and linguistics. We're talking about Jacob Grimm, and yeah, that Grimm. He wasn't just collecting fairy tales, you know? He was basically decoding the very DNA of ancient European beliefs.
This brings us to the big question, right? See, Grimm looked at these old myths and realized something huge. The neat little boxes we put these creatures in today, they just didn't exist back then. He had this hunch that they were all part of the same big, mysterious family, and that the story just got broken up over the centuries.
All right, so to find the answer, we've got to zoom out a bit first. Before we can even talk about elves and dwarves specifically, we need to get our heads around this much bigger category they were once a part of.
And that category is the wit. According to Grimm, this was the old-school catch-all term for a whole kingdom of supernatural beings. And look, these weren't just random monsters bumping around in the night. No, they were a whole community, a society, living right alongside ours, with powers we could only dream of. But, well, they were smaller than us.
And here's where it gets really cool. Grimm actually traces how this word kind of falls apart over time. It starts out in Gothic as weorðung, this really powerful word for a spirit, a being, a thing, but then it slowly gets watered down. In Old High German, it's just a creature. Fast forward to modern German, and a wicht is this kind of pitiful, hapless little fellow. And get this, in English, the word not, it literally means no white. No thing. That huge, powerful concept of a spirit was eventually reduced to absolute zero.
Okay, so we've got this huge world of whites. Now, let's zoom in on the one we all think we know so well, the elf. And believe me, this is where Grimm's detective work gets really good.
He figured that to understand what an elf actually was, he first had to figure out what the word itself meant to the people who first used it. And the answer, he was convinced, was hiding in plain sight, right there in the roots of the word.
And this is the connection he made. The old High German word for elf, albs, sounds an awful lot like the Latin word for white, albus. This led him to a game-changing theory. The original idea of an elf wasn't about pointy ears or magic bows. It was about brightness. They were, at their core, beings of light.
But that simple idea, elves as white spirits? Man, that was just the beginning. It unlocked a whole bigger structure, like a trilogy, that completely flips our understanding of what they are. Okay, this is the main event right here. As Grimm dug into the Old Norse sources, he found that the ancient world didn't just have the elf. No, they had 3 distinct types, each with its own nature, its own home, and its own place in the universe.
So Grimm breaks it all down into these 3 groups. First up, you've got the ljósálfar, the light elves. They lived up in the heavens and were, literally brighter than the sun. Then there are the dökkálfar, or dark elves. They lived deep down in the earth, and their look was described as dusky, kind of obscure. And finally, you have the svartálfar, the black elves, who were blacker than pitch. So yeah, 3 completely different kinds of beings.
All right, let's take a closer look at those dark elves for a second. Grimm makes a really important point here. Their name doesn't necessarily mean they were evil, just dim or shadowy. He theorized that they might actually be the Nair, the deadly pale ghosts of the dead, who lived in Hell, the Norse underworld. So you've got these heavenly elves made of light, and then you have these underworld elves who are basically spirits of the dead. Wild, right?
Okay, so that leaves one group unaccounted for. And this, my friends, is the final piece of the puzzle. This is what connects everything back to the fantasy dwarves we know today.
So what's the deal with that third group? They're not from the heavens, and they're not spirits from the underworld. Who in the world were the svartálfar, the black elves?
This is where Grimm just lays the evidence out side by side. On one hand, the myths say the black elves are black and live in a place called Svartalfaheim. On the other hand, different myths talk about dwarfs, the dvergar, who have this sooty look and live inside mountains and caves. Come on, the overlap is pretty hard to ignore.
And this is the brilliant conclusion he comes to. The black elves are the dwarves. They're the same beings. They were never separate creatures to begin with. And their blackness, it wasn't about being evil.
It was the grime. It was the soot from their forges, from being master smiths deep inside the mountains.
I mean, Grimm says it himself pretty plainly. He points out that the #1 characteristic of the dwarfs in the Norse Eddas, these ancient mythological texts, is that they're all incredible smiths. And just like the Cyclopes from Greek myths, who are also master smiths, all that time working at the forge is what gives them that dark, sooty appearance. So a black elf was really just another name for a dwarf smith.
So get this. The creature we call a dwarf today isn't a separate race at all. It's actually one of the 3 original types of elves. And this one discovery just goes to show that the stories we think we know are so often just these simplified, broken-down versions of something way richer and way more complex. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other secrets are just waiting to be rediscovered in our oldest myths?